The first rays of morning light sliced through the curtains like sharp blades, striking my throbbing head as if punishing me for the night before. I groggily sat up on the couch, still in last night's clothes, the events of the evening a blurry haze. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, cheerful, carefree laughter. My wife Linda's distinct cackle was unmistakable, accompanied by the voices of her best friend Rachel and Rachel's husband Jake. "Morning, sleepyhead," Linda called out, stepping into the doorway with a coffee mug in hand, her tone dripping with mockery. Her grin was far too bright for someone who should have been nursing a hangover. "You were out cold by 9. Maybe lay off the whiskey next time, lightweight." Jake's voice joined in from the kitchen, his smirk practically audible. "Yeah, man, you missed the real party." Their laughter grated on my already frazzled nerves, but something else gnawed at me, a sense of unease, like an itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't just the teasing. It was the way Linda avoided meeting my eyes. The way Jake's smug tone carried an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. I tried to shake it off, but then Ethan, my son, appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his expression serious, too serious for a kid. "Dad," he whispered, tugging at my sleeve, his voice low and urgent. "Come upstairs. Now." The weight in his tone sobered me instantly, cutting through the fog of my hangover. I followed him upstairs, my wife's laughter still echoing faintly in the background, a haunting soundtrack to my unease. Inside Ethan's room, he closed the door carefully, then reached for a small stuffed bear on his shelf. From within, he pulled out a tiny camera. "I hid this in here," he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. "Why would you do that?" I asked, confusion mingling with dread. "I heard things," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. "I didn't trust Mom." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My knees felt weak as I sat on the edge of his bed. "What are you talking about?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he plugged the camera into his tablet and pressed play. The video was grainy, but the figures were unmistakable. It was our living room, late at night. Linda and Jake were there alone. Their laughter was soft but intimate, their body language crossing lines no friend should ever cross. Linda leaned into Jake, whispering something I couldn't make out. He touched her shoulder, then her face, his expression far too familiar. At one point, Rachel walked into the frame, holding a glass. "You two better stop before he wakes up," she teased, her voice light, her smirk anything but serious. The scene shifted, but the implications didn't. Ethan paused the video, his face full of pain. "I didn't want to show you, Dad," he said softly. "But you needed to know." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun as the weight of what I'd seen crashed down on me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it, dismiss it, but there was no mistaking what the footage revealed. Linda's betrayal was undeniable, her audacity overwhelming. And Jake, someone I had trusted, was right there with her. My fists clenched as rage bubbled just beneath the surface. But I forced myself to stay calm, if only for Ethan's sake. "Don't tell anyone about this," I said, gripping his shoulder and trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll handle it." As I made my way back downstairs, the laughter from the kitchen grew louder, mocking me at every step. Linda's piercing laugh, Jake's smugness, it all grated on my nerves. They didn't know that their game was up. They didn't know I had seen everything. Sitting at the kitchen table, I forced a neutral expression and reached for the plate of toast Linda slid in front of me. "Feeling better?" she asked sweetly, her smile saccharine and insincere. "Much," I replied, my voice cold but measured. Her laughter echoed again, but I didn't flinch. Inside, I was seething, but outside, I played the fool. Her laughter wouldn't last much longer. The laughter downstairs didn't stop echoing in my mind, even as I sat on Ethan's bed staring at the paused video. On the screen, Linda and Jake whispered and touched each other like conspirators who thought they were invincible. They didn't just cross a line, they obliterated it, right there in the home I had worked so hard to build. Ethan sat beside me, silent but clearly burdened. His small hands gripped his tablet tightly, his expression a heartbreaking mix of fear and guilt. "Dad, I didn't know what to do," he whispered. "I just thought you should know." I placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. You did the right thing, I said, my voice hoarse but steady. You don't need to worry about this anymore. I'll take care of it. Ethan nodded, his face solemn. He was too young to be caught in the middle of this mess. Too innocent to carry the weight of his mother's betrayal. But I wasn't. I had no illusions about what I'd seen. There was no misunderstanding, no context that could excuse their actions. After sending Ethan to stay in his room, I made my way downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The scene in the kitchen was almost laughably normal. Linda rinsing out coffee mugs, Rachel scrolling through her phone, and Jake leaning casually against the counter as if he owned the place. The sight of them made my stomach churn. Every look between Linda and Jake, every shared laugh, every subtle touch, it was all so brazen, so shameless. Hey, Greg, Linda chirped when she noticed me, her tone overly bright. Feeling better? I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral. Yeah, just needed some fresh air. Good, she said, her fake cheerfulness grating. You had us worried last night, passing out so early. Jake practically carried you to the couch. Yeah, thanks for that, I replied flatly, glancing at Jake. His smirk was infuriating. No problem, man, Jake said, chuckling. We're all friends here. Friends. The word burned in my throat like acid. I wanted to lash out, to rip the smugness off his face, but I forced myself to remain calm. I sat down at the table, watching them interact. Every glance between Linda and Jake, every overly familiar gesture, it all told me what I already knew. But I wasn't going to confront them yet. No, I needed a plan. A confrontation now would only end in chaos. I needed proof. Evidence that left no room for denial. Forcing a casual tone, I spoke up. I was thinking, I said, pretending to focus on the toast in front of me, maybe we should do something fun this weekend. A family trip to the lake or something. Linda glanced at me, clearly surprised by the suggestion. The lake? Really? Why not? I shrugged, keeping my tone light. It's been a while since we've all spent time together as a family. Rachel smirked, her expression one of barely concealed amusement. Sounds like someone's feeling sentimental. Jake let out a nervous laugh. I mean, it could be fun. Fresh air. A break from all the drama. I stared at him, my face unreadable. Yeah, a break from the drama sounds perfect. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of fake smiles and forced laughter. But my mind was already working overtime. That night, after everyone had gone home, I waited until Linda was asleep before retrieving the camera from Ethan's room. Watching the video again was like tearing open a fresh wound, but I needed to know everything. Every whispered word, every stolen touch, it was all there. You think he suspects anything? Linda's voice was low but clear. Jake laughed softly. Please. Greg's clueless. He was out before we even started. The casual cruelty of their words made my blood boil. They didn't just betray me, they mocked me. They treated me like a fool in my own home. But I wasn't clueless. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I woke before Linda. My resolve solidified. I wasn't the same man she had been fooling. While she still slept, I gathered her phone and plugged it into my laptop. She thought she was clever, deleting texts and covering her tracks, but I was more determined than she could ever anticipate. What I found on her phone made my stomach turn. Dozens of messages between her and Jake, each one more damning than the last. They joked about me, planned their secret meetups, and exchanged pictures I couldn't bear to look at. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a full-blown mockery of everything I thought our marriage stood for. By the time Linda came downstairs, I was back at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and pretending to read the news. She walked in, her hair disheveled, and kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Morning, she said cheerfully, grabbing her own cup of coffee. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She didn't notice the tension in my voice, or, if she did, she didn't care. As I watched her move around the kitchen, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had her cornered with no way out. That evening, I decided to push them further. What do you think about hosting a little barbecue tomorrow? I asked Linda casually as we cleaned up after dinner. She hesitated, clearly surprised by the suggestion. A barbecue? Tomorrow. Yeah, I said with a shrug. It's been a while since we had friends over. Her eyes flicked toward me, suspicious. Are you sure? I thought you were feeling off lately. I'm fine, I said with a small smile, pretending to brush off her concern. Besides, it'll be fun. Invite Rachel and Jake. Her hesitation melted away as the idea fed her ego. Linda loved playing the role of the perfect hostess. All right, she said, her tone brightening. I'll text them. The next evening, the backyard was a picture-perfect setup. String lights twinkled overhead, the grill was sizzling, and Linda flitted around chatting and laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Rachel and Jake arrived together, both carrying their usual smug attitudes. Jake clapped me on the back as he strolled in. Grill master at work again, huh? Anything for good friends, I replied evenly, hiding the anger bubbling beneath the surface. As the night wore on, I let the conversation flow, watching every glance, every touch between Linda and Jake. They were careful, but not careful enough. It was a dance they had perfected, but they didn't know I had already seen the rehearsals. Remember that trip to the mountains last year? Rachel asked, her eyes flicking toward Linda. That was a wild weekend. Linda froze for just a moment before laughing, her tone forced. Oh yeah, that was fun. You guys should have come, Greg. I filed the moment away, another piece of evidence to add to the growing pile. When the night was winding down, I decided it was time to strike. I stood up, raising my glass in a mock toast. To good friends and honest company, I said, my voice steady as my eyes locked onto Linda's. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. What's this about, Greg? She asked, her tone tense. I smiled, setting my glass down deliberately. It's about how lucky I am to have such good friends and a loving wife. The silence was deafening. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, Rachel's smirk widened, and Linda's mask of composure began to crack. You've had too much to drink, Linda said sharply, her tone defensive. Why don't we wrap this up? Oh, I'm stone cold sober, I replied, my tone calm. But you're right. Let's wrap this up. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the video Ethan had shown me. With a flick of my thumb, I cast it to the patio TV screen. The footage filled the space, the unmistakable images of Linda and Jake in our living room, laughing and touching. The sound of Rachel's teasing voice about waking me up played loud and clear. Linda shot to her feet, her face draining of color. What the hell is this? Jake's chair scraped against the concrete as he stood, his face pale. Rachel, on the other hand, leaned back in her chair, her smirk growing wider. Oh, this is rich, she said, shaking her head. I knew you'd get caught eventually. Linda turned on Rachel, her voice venomous. Shut up, Rachel. You don't know what you're talking about. I stepped forward, my voice rising. Don't turn this on her, Linda. You've been lying to me, cheating on me, making a fool out of me in my own home. And you, I said, pointing at Jake, my tone dripping with contempt. You're supposed to be my friend. Jake stammered, his face red. Greg, I can explain. I don't want your explanations, I snapped. I want you out. Both of you. Linda's defiance flared. You're being dramatic. It was just a stupid mistake. A mistake? I laughed bitterly. No, Linda. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This is betrayal. The tension boiled over. Jake made a move to leave, but I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. You don't walk out of here until I'm done. Linda's voice turned desperate. Greg, let's talk about this privately. Oh, we'll talk, I said, my eyes never leaving Jake. But not before everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are. The fallout from the confrontation lingered in the air like smoke from a smoldering fire. Linda and Jake had no idea just how much I knew or how far I was willing to go. But they'd find out soon enough. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the living room, reviewing every piece of evidence I had. The video was damning enough, but I needed more proof that would leave no room for doubt, no opportunity for excuses. The next morning, I woke early, determined to take control of the situation. While Linda was still asleep, I gathered her phone again, digging deeper into her digital trail. This time, I uncovered something even more sinister: financial records that showed thousands of dollars siphoned from our joint account into a private one under her name. The transactions were frequent and deliberate. Scrolling further, I found Jake's name attached to several of the transfers. My stomach churned. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated scheme. They weren't just betraying me emotionally, they were exploiting me financially. By the time Linda came downstairs, I was back at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and pretending to browse the news. She walked in with her usual bright demeanor, completely unaware that her lies were unraveling. "Morning," she said cheerfully. "Morning," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She grabbed her coffee and sat across from me, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. For a moment, I just watched her, wondering how she could act so calm, so indifferent. "Linda," I said suddenly, breaking the silence. She looked up, startled. "Yeah? Do you ever think about how much we've been through? All the years we've spent building this life together." Her expression softened slightly, a flicker of something genuine crossing her face. "Of course I do, Greg. Why would you ask that?" I studied her carefully, looking for any sign of sincerity. All I saw was the same mask she'd been wearing for months. "Just curious," I said quietly, my mind already planning my next move. Later that day, I reached out to Claire, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who had helped a friend of mine through a messy divorce. I laid out everything: the affair, the financial betrayal, the evidence I had collected. Claire listened intently before responding. "You've got a strong case," she said firmly. "But if you want to come out on top, you'll need to control the narrative." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Linda's going to try to paint herself as the victim," Claire explained. "She'll claim you neglected her, that the affair was a result of your failures as a husband. If you let her set the stage, you'll spend the entire divorce playing defense." Her words hit home. Linda had always been good at twisting the truth, turning arguments around to make me feel like the bad guy. I couldn't let her do that now, not when so much was at stake. "Okay," I said. "What do you suggest?" Claire outlined a bold plan. It was unconventional and risky, but it was exactly what I needed. By the time we hung up, I felt a new sense of clarity. Linda had underestimated me. That was her first mistake. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I gathered every piece of evidence I could: financial records, texts, videos, anything that painted a full picture of her betrayal. But I didn't stop there. I also compiled proof of Jake's involvement, as well as Rachel's complicity. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated effort to manipulate and exploit me. When I thought I had everything I needed, I reached out to someone who deserved to know the truth: Jake's wife, Emily. We weren't close, but I had always liked her. She had a right to know what was happening. When she answered my call, her voice was hesitant. "Greg? Is everything okay?" "No," I said bluntly. "But I think you deserve to know what's really going on." I laid it all out for her: the affair, the financial schemes, the evidence I had collected. Emily was silent for a long time before finally speaking. "I knew something was off," she said quietly. "Jake's been acting strange for months. I didn't think it was this." "You didn't deserve this," I told her sincerely. "Neither did you," she replied. "Thank you for telling me." By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. Linda stormed into the house, her face red with anger. "What the hell did you do, Greg?" she demanded, slamming the door behind her. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Everyone's been calling me, asking questions, making accusations. You've been spreading lies about me." "Lies?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to see the proof again, or should I send it to the people who haven't called you yet?" Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of fear breaking through her defiance. "You think this makes you look like the good guy? You're pathetic." "Maybe," I said, standing up. "But at least I'm honest. Can you say the same?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening. I knew who it was before she even answered. Rachel. Their little alliance was crumbling faster than I had anticipated. Trouble in paradise? I asked, smirking. Don't push me, Greg, she hissed. But there was fear in her voice now, and I knew I had the upper hand. The days that followed were a whirlwind of revelations and confrontations, but I knew the storm was far from over. Linda had gone eerily quiet, staying out late and avoiding me. She thought her silence would keep me guessing, but I saw it for what it was: calculation. She was planning something, and I needed to stay one step ahead. Ethan was with a friend for the night, giving me time to think. As I sat at the dining table, sifting through the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, my phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. Unknown. You don't know the full story. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street at 8 p.m. if you want answers. The cryptic text sent a chill down my spine. Was this a trap? Or just another twist in this nightmare? After a moment's hesitation, I replied, Me. Who is this? No response. At exactly 8 p.m., I walked into the coffee shop. It was nearly empty, save for a woman sitting in a corner booth, her face partially hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat. She looked up as I approached, and I froze. It was Emily, Jake's wife. You sent the text? I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. She nodded, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. I didn't know if you'd come. Why the secrecy? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Because I didn't want this getting back to Jake or Linda, she said, her voice trembling. I found something, Greg. Something that changes everything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table. I went through Jake's computer after you called me, she explained. I thought I'd find more messages or photos, but I found this instead. Inside the envelope were documents, pages and pages of business contracts, financial records, and emails. As I skimmed through them, my blood ran cold. These weren't just financial transactions. They were detailed plans, agreements between Linda and Jake, outlining payouts, fake loans, and schemes to funnel money through my business accounts. It was fraud on a scale I hadn't imagined. What the hell is this? I whispered, my hands trembling. Emily's voice cracked as she explained. Jake told me it was just an affair, but this is something else. They've been planning this for years, Greg. They weren't just cheating on you, they were using you. Using both of us. Her words felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore, it was criminal. What do we do now? I asked, my voice low. Emily's eyes met mine, a flicker of determination shining through her fear. We exposed them. Together. The next morning, I met with Claire to go over the new evidence. She was stunned by the depth of the betrayal, but wasted no time in formulating a plan. This isn't just a divorce case anymore, she said firmly. This is a criminal matter. We need to involve the authorities. The idea of a public legal battle made my stomach churn, but I knew it was the only way to ensure Linda and Jake faced real consequences. What's the first step? I asked. We set a trap, Claire replied, her tone confident. Something that catches them in the act. If we can prove they're actively trying to steal from you, it'll strengthen your case and ensure they face legal action. It was risky, but I agreed. With Claire's help, I set up a fake business deal using one of the accounts Linda and Jake had targeted. The goal was to lure them into transferring money, creating undeniable proof of their crimes. A week later, the trap was set. I sat in my office, watching the account in real time. Sure enough, a transfer request popped up, initiated from an IP address linked to Jake's home. Moments later, a second request followed, this one tied to Linda's laptop. Claire called me immediately. We've got them, she said, her voice triumphant. I'm contacting the authorities now. An hour later, police officers arrived at Jake's house. I watched from my car as they led him out in handcuffs, his face pale and panicked. Linda was next. She screamed and protested as they escorted her to the squad car, but it was no use. The evidence was ironclad. The days that followed were surreal. Linda and Jake were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, among other things. Emily filed for divorce, and I did the same. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over. But the scars remained. Trust, once shattered, is hard to rebuild. Ethan struggled to process everything, but we worked through it together. One evening, as we sat together, Ethan looked up at me and said, "I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for yourself." His words hit me harder than anything Linda had done. They reminded me why I had fought so hard, not just for myself, but for him. He deserved a father who wouldn't let anyone walk all over him. Looking back, I realized the most painful part of the ordeal wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easily I had been fooled. But I learned something important. Strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about surviving it and coming out stronger on the other side. As for Linda, Jake, and anyone else who thought they could take advantage of me, I had one final message. Never underestimate the quiet ones.